When the city of San Francisco passed an ordinance to boycott doing business with red states 7 years ago, they thought the ban would have an economic impact. Well, it did, just not the impact they expected. City officials are quietly looking to walk back this petty decision after a recent study confirmed the boycott policy has damaged their bottom line while having almost zero economic impact on their targets. And they've got like 30 states on their blacklist, red states, that believe that human life is precious and should be protected, that there's a difference between men and women. So here's the question. Does this show once again that the left's woke policies are simply not sustainable? That they are bad for business? Well, join me now to discuss this and more is Matt Carpenter, Director of FRC Action. Matt, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Great to be with you.
All right, so it's been 7 years since San Francisco adopted this policy known as 12X. Tell our viewers and listeners about it.
So basically, several months after the Obergefell decision, the city of San Francisco set out to pressure essentially conservative states. And what they ended up doing was they ended up granting authority to the city administrator to create a list of states that have declined to take up special protections for individuals on the basis of their self-identified sexual orientation, gender identity. And I think later on they ended up expanding it to abortion rights and what they determined as voting rights. And then they attached provisions in this ordinance to prohibit the city from funding travel from city employees rather to those states on the list, and then also prohibited the city from doing business with companies headquartered in those states.
So it was not only restricting the travel, but what really got to them apparently was restricting the contracting of businesses in these red states. It ended up, according to the study, adding about 10 to 20% surcharge to much of the cost of doing business in San Francisco. So they're the ones that are having to pay more because of their intolerance toward those who want to protect the unborn and who refuse to go with the woke policies of the left.
That's exactly right, Tony. I mean, the policy set out to pressure red states, and not only that, they actually tried to encourage other cities to take up similar ordinances. And you can kind of imagine what would have happened if large cities across the whole country did this at the same time. There might have been an effect, but essentially San Francisco was left hung out to dry by other large metropolitan areas. And in the report, they actually point out that not one single state changed their law because of their policy. They couldn't find a single instance in which this policy, the intent of this ordinance, worked. But they did outline a significant premium they had to pay to do business. And that's what happens when you cancel 60% of the states in the union.
Yeah. And they could have asked us. We could have saved them a lot of trouble because we've been tracking this for quite some time. These policies and the chest beating of the left. For instance, actually earlier in the program had Dan Bishop on. If I'm not mistaken, I think he was the author of the HB2 in North Carolina, what was dubbed the bathroom bill back when he was in the legislature there. And you had all of these woke corporations saying, we're not going to do business with North Carolina. We're gonna tank their economy. And guess what happened? Their economy kept going up and up and up. And in fact, I think it was Forbes listed them for like 3 consecutive years as one of the best states to do business in and one of the strongest economies.
Mm-hmm. Well, Tony, one of the great ironies of this whole thing, and you point out the situation in North Carolina, I mean, a huge percentage of the silicon that a lot of these big tech companies use is produced right out of North Carolina. And that happened to be a state that San Francisco, which is home to so many of these large tech companies, wouldn't allow their city employees to travel to. They wouldn't allow, because of this ordinance, to contract with companies that had headquarters in North Carolina. So, I mean, just right there in that one simple instance, I mean, you point out that the conservative states felt no essential economic burden from moving forward with a conservative agenda, but they're stepping on their toes the whole way trying to implement their woke agenda. So what a contrast, really, that shows.
Well, in the meantime, Matt, how many folks have left the state of California looking for redder pastures?
This has been the news for a couple years now, Tony. I think some estimates I've seen show more than 500,000 Californians have opted for red states, whether that's because of more conservative policies or more favorable tax climate for their small businesses or for their estates. Who knows? But what's interesting is if you dig down a little further, I've even seen estimates that the Bay Area, where San Francisco is located, has accounted for almost 100,000. Or even more than that. I think it's about 115,000 of those 500,000 migrating out of California have come just out of that Bay Area alone. So you can see people voting with their feet as well.
And if I'm not mistaken, California lost a congressional seat in this last census, did they not?
If it wasn't one, it was two. But yes, I believe they did lose a seat, and they might have been on the cusp of losing another one. It was pretty close.
Look, it's not going to work out for them. And this is what I think eventually we're going to see these policies of the left and these liberals that gain control of these governments. It's just unsustainable. And people are going to vote with their feet.
Yeah. Tony, I would also mention that San Francisco, we have to remember, is the place where just last year they ditched their woke district attorney.
Right.
And they just recalled 3 school board members. And so they're not electing super conservatives in San Francisco, obviously, but there is a limit there that people will accept, and maybe we are at or near peak wokeness.
Yeah, I think they've reached the bottom. Well, maybe not yet, but maybe soon. Matt, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.